Peace and welcome to The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Today, folks, we got a lot to talk about. Let's talk about Vice President Harris visiting Poland and condemning the bombing of the maternity hospital and what that means. Does that bring us closer to having military presence in that part of the world? We'll talk about it. Also, Florida GOP Senate passes a bill to ban not making people feel bad about history. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. Later on, Smokey Robinson said he's not African American, he's black. We'll talk about the difference in Smokey's eyes. And then later, we check in with Dr. Tanya Matthews, the president and CEO of the International African American Museum in South Carolina, to give us an update on when the great museum is planning to open. So stay riding with us. We got a lot to get to today right here on The Culture, only on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Oh my goodness, we got a lot to talk about, and I'm very, very excited about the discussions that we got lined up for you. The first one is what's going on in the Russian-Ukraine conflict, the war over there. Vice President Harris has gone to Poland, which is an ally of the United States, to check on the development there. Also to see some of to learn more about the damage that's been done to the Ukraine. And as we know, there has been a lot of civilian casualties as a result of the bombing of Ukraine. And Vice President Harris has not been very nice with her words in saying that the United States is going to be providing what she calls ironclad support of its NATO allies. We'll be checking in a few moments with political contributor Hassan to give us some insight as to what we can expect. But first, I want to play for you a little bit of what Vice President Harris had to say and how she is doubling down that United States is prepared to make any type of defensive moves to show its stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian people and the country. Here's what she had to say.
What is at stake this very moment are some of the guiding principles around the NATO alliance, and in particular, the issue and the importance of defending sovereignty and territorial integrity, in this case of Ukraine. As President Duda has described, we have been witnessing for weeks, and certainly just in the last 24 hours, atrocities of unimaginable proportion. A maternity hospital, a children's hospital, where we have witnessed pregnant women who were there for care, for one reason, being taken out because they required care because of an act of violence, unprovoked, unjustified. I am here in Poland as an expression of the enduring and important relationship between the United States and Poland that again has been long-standing, but in particular on the issue of Ukraine, is unified and is clear. We will do everything together, in partnership, in solidarity, to support what is necessary at this very moment in terms of the humanitarian and security needs of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people.
That was Vice President Harris earlier today giving her remarks. Now, folks, here's the thing that is concerning for me as we dived deep into this whole conversation. Is this the impetus for war? If we see civilian casualties continue to rise, and as we're getting reports that they are rising, because bombings are happening all across the Ukrainian region from the north to the south. Is this going to be a reason for the United States of America to get involved, to have boots on the ground, to get involved in this fight. Now, you heard what the vice president said. She said that she's there to show their solidarity, the United States' solidarity in terms of humanitarian efforts and security needs. Now, that can mean a lot of different things. On the humanitarian side, that can simply mean that the United States is providing aid to Ukraine. And today, it was announced that the House of Representatives has moved forward in providing $13 billion in aid to the Ukrainian people. That's what it was announced. And it's going to move on to the Senate. And most likely it's going to pass. And it's most likely it's going to be signed by the president to provide that humanitarian aid. My concern is the security part. My concern is, what does aid in the sense of security look like? Now, I want to share with you just a few items here, because as we were having this conversation, my producers and I, we wanted to discuss a little bit more as to how certain wars were provoked or got started. And then I'm going to bring Hassan Giordano into this conversation in a moment. But look at the situation, folks. Now, wars, there are a number of reasons that wars get started. Nationalism, economic gain, religion. It's a whole lot of reasons. But if you look at the history of World War I, for example, let's start there. One of the big reasons was the assassination of Austria's Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That kicked that off. World War II. That was sparked by the 1939 Nazi invasion of Poland. That was a 6-year war that involved 30 countries until the Allies defeated Nazi Germany and Japan in 1945. And we know what happened in Japan and how Japan responded with Pearl Harbor. If we bring it a little bit up to date, the Vietnam War, North Vietnam versus South Vietnam in the United States of America. 58,000 Americans died. 3 million people died within that war, but 58,000 were Americans. One of the largest loss of life that we've experienced as a country. And then the Iraq War, all based upon the thought, the lie that Saddam Hussein, or rather the claims that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And there were some U.S. officials who even falsely accused Saddam Hussein of harboring and supporting Al-Qaeda at that time. So wars can be started in a lot of different ways, and it is a very, very concerning situation when the United States is prepared to make military moves because of security needs or humanitarian needs. It was reported from The Guardian that Russian bombs have completely destroyed this children and maternity hospital in Mariupol. And a number of authorities have said that shelling again halted mass executions from several cities. It was also said that including the devastated southern port, where conditions are described to be apocalyptic. According to the Ukraine's foreign minister, he accused Russia of holding 400,000 people hostage in Mariupol, much of whose population has been without power, heat, water, or phone signals for over a week, while the president is trying to figure things out, while the president is actually in hiding, President Zelensky. 400,000 people are left held hostage. I want to bring in Hassan Giordano. He is a political contributor. He's been in a number of media outlets, and we're happy to have him on the show. He serves as the owner of DMV Daily. Hassan, thank you so much, brother, for joining us. How are you this afternoon?
Always a pleasure, brother Farajii. Thanks for having me.
Hey, absolutely, big bro. You've been watching this situation unfold as much as we've been watching it unfold. What do you make of what Vice President Kamala Harris had to say, the stance that she's taking, and how the United States is going to be moving forward on this situation?
I think this administration in particular is trying to really balance a line that they weren't ready for. Kamala Harris, Vice President, is going to have to put on her big boy panties real quick. And I think that's why you see the Biden administration sending her over there to Poland to make during this really tense time, right? Because like you said earlier in the broadcast, usually wars are about a number of things. Mostly it's about money, right? Most of the time, that's what the background is about. Weapons of mass destruction. We realize now, and most of us knew it back then, there was no real weapons of mass destruction. We knew what that was about. America is always sticking their nose in other people's business. In this particular case, this is purely Vladimir Putin kind of puffing out his chest and showing the world what his ego tells him he is, right? He's always had this notion that he wanted to be the big bad bully on the block, and he really wanted the old USSR, Russia, reformated. And so that is kind of step one in his strategy. And that's why you see Poland and their president coming out so strongly against this, because they also understand that they're next on his list if he can get through tackling Ukraine successfully without any real pushback.
So do you feel like we're getting closer to creating a tipping point where America is going to have some military presence in Russia, Ukraine, and Poland, in that part of the world?
I'm not sure if it's going to be America themselves, and I hope it really isn't. I hope we're not the only ones, because across the world, people are starting to see this atrocity for what it is, that this is all about a madman, i.e. Vladimir Putin, doing what he wants to do. But we also have to be mindful of this no-holds-barred relationship that he has with China's president, right? They've been very upfront and public about this, and China's almost in the background kind of waiting and egging on America, because trust and believe, there's a lot of countries over there that are aligned with China, that are aligned in some degree with Russia, who are waiting for America to get involved. Now, America has been, kind of tempered in their response, as they should be. I think NATO needs to take the lead in this, and especially if you see an invasion of Poland, you will see, which is a NATO-involved country, you will see the response by NATO, and that's what the vice president can continuously stress time and time again regarding Article 5 of that treaty over there in NATO, that if you come against in any transgression against any of the NATO countries, their wording is very it's unforgiving is what they call it. And so they're not going to at all hesitate on taking the necessary actions. But I think if you look at Putin's actions, not even during Ukraine, but before that, he doesn't care. I think he realizes that he has a relationship, or he believes at least he has enough of a relationship with China that he can take on the NATO powers as long as America doesn't show its teeth. And if it does, then they're really ready to take on both.
Do you foresee this, Hassan, as being like a ploy? He's bombing civilian targets, civilian spaces, because he does want to bring in the West, and he has said it that he has a very like serious beef, for lack of a better word, serious beef with the United States. So do you feel like, okay, I know what's going to draw them in. I'm going to bomb these targets. These people are about to be collateral damage, because at the end of the day, I want to bring them into this part of the world. I want to bring them into this conflict. And he has said it at the very beginning part of this invasion. If you remember, Hassan, he mentioned that if America tries to interfere with this situation, that he will basically unleash all sorts of hell like that we've never seen before.
Mm-hmm. And absolutely is a test. And I think America is cognizant of it. I'm glad that we have somebody like President Biden who has been in this position before. It's not somebody you just throw into the mix. Of course, you know, as vice president with President Obama, he understands what war looks like and the consequences of it. So he wasn't so quick to just jump in and take the bait, as you were just talking about. Putin and China have been baiting America for quite some time, even before the Ukrainian invasion. And even to the degree that America had to stop its missile launches. It was doing test missile launching, and they chose to stop that to show China and to some degree Putin that they weren't trying to act aggressively in such a way to prompt, which would be World War III. And I think to some degree America and the world sees this. And the problem is the propaganda that we've seen from the children's hospital being bombed to even the nuclear facility that being bombed. These are acts of not so much genocide, but war crimes, crimes against humanity, which are tried within the International Criminal Court, right? So he could be actually charged as a war criminal, meaning Putin. And the problem with that, though, Farajii, is you think our criminal justice system is slow to act. The ICC is, I mean, it takes years for somebody to actually charge, and it's been very few people who've actually been convicted on that. But nonetheless, I think that is actions that will follow after all of this kind of wraps itself up.
And see, that was the other part of my question, Hassan, is that, you know, I when I kept hearing that people, you know, people say, oh, yeah, he could be charged with war crimes. I'm like, bruh, that could take forever. You know what I mean? Like, he could be, you know what I mean? That's years. That could be literally like years in the making. And it's like, I mean, we're almost at a point when I was listening to the United Nations, how they put out this resolution condemning Russia and everything. And I'm like, does Russia care? Do these countries really, really care that you have this global body of countries that are condemning their actions? He knew, I mean, Putin knew that he was going to get condemned when he dropped that first bomb. As soon as he started putting his ships in the seas, he getting his aircraft, you know, his airplanes in the sky, he knew he was going to get condemned. He had to already know that. So I'm just wondering, like, he's not playing diplomacy. He's not thinking diplomatically. He's thinking power, control. He's thinking about legacy for the country of Russia. He's thinking about his own economic gain. I mean, he's not thinking about what the world thinks of him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it in the first place.
Right. He wants to be Gorbachev 2.0. That's all it is. He wants a reunited Soviet Union from back in the 70s and the 80s. And that's what he said coming in from the day one, right? He wants his legacy to be strong, be proud. Like you said, he doesn't care about NATO. Look, a 30-country world, what is NATO going to do? I mean, really, what's Estonia going to come bomb him? These aren't people that he's scared of or intimidated by. Neither is China. And with that relationship, with that no holds barred, and they purposely say this, no holds barred agreement between these two countries, they realize that they have the mechanisms and the weapons, not only just the military might, to be able to take on any member of NATO and the countries. However, they know that America, they ain't going to sleep on America either, right? And they shouldn't, because America still is the big bad bully on the block. We just don't show it at all times. But if you look at the Black and brown countries in Africa and other parts of the Eastern nations who are actually against America, America better be very timid about how it responds to, like you said, the ploys from Russia and China before they just go headstrong in from day one.
You know, so I'm glad you brought that up, Hassan, talking about Africa. Where does Africa fit into this, considering that a lot of the students had to leave Ukraine as a result of this bombing? Do you feel like Africa, the countries of Africa are going to stand with America, or are they going to stand with Russia because they're getting so, you know, they get a lot of their food, the oil is coming from that part from Russia? I mean, where does Africa fit with this?
Well, you have different parts, different regions that probably, some of them will decide with Russia. But I think the global sentiment that you're starting to see is against Russia because of how they're handling the Ukraine invasion, right? They didn't do it diplomatically. They didn't even do it in such a way that when you go to war, there's certain war crimes that you just don't commit, that Russia just doesn't care about, right? And so I think whether that's actually Russia doing what they're doing or if it's propaganda being portrayed by others, including possibly America, to make Russia look that bad on the global scale, that make other countries who may have sided with Russia and China kind of take pause and say, nah, I don't know if I really want to side with somebody who has been perceived as a madman.
And see, that's going to be the big part. And I think this is the global test right now, brother, that America, NATO, and all of these countries are going to have to see, you know, especially like the NATO countries that border Ukraine, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania. All of these countries are going to have to figure out like what role they're going to play at this point, because Russia is the superpower in that part of the world. Russia has the nuclear might, they have the military might, they have the relationship still with China, and I think all of these countries, the leaderships of all of these countries, going to have to rethink how to move forward, because when the dust does settle, Hassan, I truly believe people are going to try to figure out, you know, they're not going to try to cut alliances with America, but they don't want to cut alliance with another superpower that's right next door to them. I mean, it puts them in a very, very precarious position.
Oh, absolutely. Because, you know, neither side is going to want you to be able to not take sides, right? They're going to say, okay, you know, when history comes to call on, we want to know what side you stood on. And like you said, America is not a country or a superpower that they have to deal with on a regular basis. They know what we've known, that when Putin came in, his strategy from day one was to reunite those regions that was once the USSR. And so they've always been on their kind of P's and Q's and kind of realizing that behind the scenes, he was all the time strategizing on how he can make that and bring that into fruition. So they realize, including Putin's president, Poland's president, Duda, who you've seen with the vice president in the clip that you had showed, are very concerned about how Ukraine is handled. And it's not so much about the Ukrainian people, it's about the Polish people and what that means for them after Ukraine is finished.
My other thinking is, and I know some people might get upset with me about this, Hassan, but I really hope that the vice president is able to, you know, at least touch base with some of those students, the African students that were denied, you know, they were denied from getting out. That was part of my hope when I heard that her trip was coming over there. It's like, is she going to visit some of these African students? Do you see that being a possibility, or do you think that's not even necessary at this point?
Probably not necessary at this point, but, you know, that could come to fruition at some point. Absolutely. And I'm sorry about my connection. I don't know how if you're picking up everything. I know I'm breaking up in and out. I realize that.
No, we hear you.
In a Deborah position. Okay. All right.
We hear you. We hear you, brother. All right, look, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's bring the conversation back home. Florida's GOP Senate has put out a bill, folks. These people put out a bill where you can't hurt somebody's feelings about teaching history. I'm serious. Like I'm gonna share with you some of the details of this bill and what the Florida governor DeSantis is doing. Absolutely insane. Like, you can't even speak the truth or teach history, because now in Florida, if it makes somebody feel bad, if it offends somebody, if it makes them feel guilty, that's against the law. We'll get into that conversation in the next 30. Right here on The Culture, only on the Black Star Network. Stay with me. We'll be right back.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to the show. Let's talk about what's happening down in Florida. The Florida Senate voted just the day to ban public schools and private businesses from teaching people to feel guilty for historical events committed by people of their race, addressing a major top priority of Governor Ron DeSantis' agenda. Now, this bill, which passed the GOP-controlled state house by a vote of 24-15, would also prohibit instructions that said certain races or sexes are privileged or oppressed. The legislation previously passed the state house 74-41, and now hits to DeSantis' desk where he is expected to sign it. Ron DeSantis, if you're not familiar with who he has been very vocal about stopping any conversation around quote unquote critical race theory, having discussions about American histories that make white people feel a certain type of way. And he has done his part to keep the conservative movement in Florida happy. And he's also being talked about as being a presidential hopeful for 2024. So he's talking about that. He's talking about leading the cultural wars for 2022 midterms. I mean, he's kind of just being put himself out there. He's putting himself out there. I saw Brother Roland send out this tweet about Ron DeSantis like a couple of days ago, saying that he's 100% pure evil and that he's actually worse than Trump because he's smarter. He knows how government works. He knows how to get bills across. So if he becomes the nominee for the Republican Party come 2024, we could be dealing with a different type of threat that we didn't see coming from Trump. I want to bring back Hassan Giordano, who serves as the owner of DMV Daily Media Group, and to get his take on this situation here. Hassan, thank you so much again, brother, for joining us. I see you changed the back. You got in a better place.
Yeah, I had to go somewhere so I can actually hear you, and it wasn't
you can actually hear me
and all that. Reception is awesome here.
Oh, I got you. But what do you make of Ron DeSantis and this latest attempt to keep history and, more importantly, to try to preserve the feelings of white people? And I mean, this is like white fragility 2.5. You know what I mean? Where you don't even want to even teach anybody the history because you don't want to make people feel guilty. What is this about?
Well, Roland was absolutely right. People want to worry about Donald Trump. They need to be worried about Ron DeSantis and the Governor Kemp from Georgia, because these are two very politically savvy and smart right-wing conservatives who have now followed and catered to this Donald Trump base of racism that has really sparked this right-wing group of what I call Klansmen in this country, who are just dressed in denim and business suits, who no longer have to hide behind the white hooded sheets any longer. They're taking over the Republican Party and expecting the rest of America to follow, Farajii. And, you know, Senator Chevron Jones from down there in Florida was exactly right. The piece of legislation you're talking about, which followed, ironically, HB 1557, which is the Parental Rights in Education bill, also known as the Don't Say Gay bill, this isn't about individual freedoms. It's a national agenda to kind of reframe history in a very dishonest way in order to advance a particular social agenda that these individuals have about Black people, aimed at really whitewashing our history so that little white children don't feel uncomfortable for the sins of their ancestors. But the problem is, Farajii, their history is still alive today. Look at what happened to Ryan Coogler, the director, for those who don't know, director of the Black Panther movie. In Atlanta, of all places, he's going into Bank of America to get his own money, and they call the cops on him, put him in handcuffs, and his two companions who are outside in the car, put in the back of a squad car because they think they're robbing a bank. Like, come on. But they're getting away with this in today's America, in the Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis America today.
Let me just break it down what the language is in this Florida law. An individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, does not bear responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. It also says that an individual should not be made to feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race. What the hell is this? I mean, I'm serious, hey, bro. You know, you are Mr. Politics, so you know you've seen a lot of crazy stuff. But I've studied politics for a long time. I have never seen a piece of legislation that don't talk about money, that don't talk about property. It talks about your feelings.
Right.
Like, I've never seen something like, no, you can't make people feel guilty. You can't bring anguish. You can't make them feel discomfort. Like, you're going to put up forth a bill to make sure that people aren't feeling bad. I just can't. I can't get over this white fragility, man. Hassan, I can't get over it. And I know that there is a concerted effort by Republicans. There's a concerted effort by a lot of people, but do they not see that this is the very reason why this country is in the condition that it's in? Because we can't confront the truth. We can't speak the truth. We can't even deal with the truth adequately. Do they not see that?
They don't want to see it. And that's the sad part of this country is there's a part of this country who just does not want to have a conversation and or see the differences of people in this country, right? I was just in Vegas not too long ago, and I was talking to some individuals who were there, very right-wing, very Donald Trump supporters, and we're talking about critical race theory. Now, mind you, these are the same individuals who allowed, Governor Youngkin got in based off of critical race theory that didn't even exist in Virginia, but they made it a campaign issue. And you'd be surprised, Farajii, how many of these individuals have absolutely no clue of what's being fed to them by their right-wing party. The individuals I'm talking about that were in Vegas said, I was always against it. I will always be against Obamacare. how dare you? But don't take away my Medicare opportunities. And like, you realize they are the same thing. Right? They just don't. They just take what they are being fed on Fox News and others and run with it and have absolutely no clue on what the reality is behind it. And instead of sitting back and really having a conversation with people, instead of believing what they're hearing on these networks, they're just kind of just being spoon-fed this stuff. And this is where we're at. And that's why I tell people, you can worry about, I'm not trying to take anything away from the war in Ukraine and things that are going on all around this world. But at the end of the day, we need to worry about America. And we are on the verge of a civil war in this country because you have individuals who are no longer compromising, who are no longer speaking to one another. They're talking at each other. And that is what led to the Civil War from the giddy up. It wasn't just about slavery and things of that sort. If you go back and study history, and that's kind of what we're getting to today.
Let me check in with some of our watchers that are just sharing their thoughts. And folks, keep your comments going. We'll try to bring them up as much as we can during the conversation. But Carla Johnson checked in and said, DeSantis can't hide the true history of America. This is the reason why we need to teach our own children, and they should challenge those who teach lies about the history of America. I'm with you, Carla. I love it. Here's one of the things that concerns me about that idea, though, Hassan. The fact that if Black adults don't know the history, then you can't teach Black children the history.
Absolutely. And the sad part is our own individuals, 30, 40, 50, even 60 and 70-year-olds, really don't know the true history of self. They don't know knowledge of self, but they certainly don't know the history of themselves because their schools weren't taught that. Right now, they have taken civics completely out of curriculum in schools across this country, especially here in Baltimore. So how are you going to know how to vote and what the political process is if they're not actually teaching it to you anymore? And this is being done on purpose. You're not going to be able to sit there and tell me that these curriculums that are being pushed onto our children are not being done on purpose because they have this operation and this idea that we're going to push this national model. But on the back end of that, I love what this is saying. It is up to the parents. It is up to the household. But like you said, Brother Farajii, not every parent is a parent.
That's true. And see, that's the other part. The thing is, if the schools aren't teaching this, if the parents don't know, then you're talking about a generation that's going to essentially have to figure it out on their own. You know, where they come from, what the contributions are, all of those things. They're going to have to work it out on their own. And it puts us as Black folks in this country, it puts us behind the 8 ball once again, because you're going to have another generation that is going to try to figure it out on its own instead of building upon what we've laid out for them.
Absolutely. And these politicians, they don't care one way or the other about what our children are coming up, but all they want to do is make sure that they stay in power. And, you know, I tell people all the time, politics, and you talked about with the wars, it's all about money. You follow the money. DeSantis and them, they understand what this agenda is. They had this strategy mapped out way before Donald Trump came along. Problem was, they weren't ready for Donald Trump. The Republican Party was not ready for a Donald Trump. He took a strategy that he learned on The Apprentice and in business, and he applied that to politics. And, you know, hate him or love him, it worked, right?
Yeah.
Now he started to gravitate the entire party towards his line of thinking. Problem is, his line of thinking is going to get them. I know we can't say.
No, we can say certain words. We can say something. We're gonna get their ass kicked. But
yeah, exactly.
but Hassan, people are, and you know it. You're in these spaces and circles. People are saying that this year for the midterms, the Republicans are going to take the House and the Senate. And that's already been foretold. So they're like, Democrats, you better get it together for either this year or you better have a hell of a candidate for 24.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day is they need to get past this midterm because I've been saying it over and over. They're going to get their butt whooped come November because they don't have an agenda. I mean, think about and look at what the Biden administration has done since they came in. Almost absolutely nothing. Infrastructure only got passed because Republicans realized This would help their base of financially sovereign people who already got money, but they knew that the money to build the infrastructure would go to their donors. That's the only reason they allowed that to go through. But every other piece of legislation that Democrats tried to pass, they couldn't get done. COVID has been a nightmare for President Biden and his administration. So coming into November, Republicans are not only going to win back the House with ease, they're going to take the Senate as well. So that leaves you really in an impasse going 2 years forward, a president with no House and no Senate. So that means you have nothing in Congress, and all they're going to do is go back and forth. The problem is nothing's going to get accomplished for the American people. That's the sad part of the reality. Yeah. They're so busy fighting against one another and trying to outdo one another that the American people end up suffering.
Absolutely. Folks, we're going to take another quick pause. When we come back, more conversation about this situation down in Florida with Governor DeSantis and this crazy-ass bill about not hurting people's feelings while teaching history. We're going to get more of your thoughts as well. So stay with us. A lot to come at you here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we have been talking about the situation down in Florida, the Florida bill, the GOP-backed bill, where Governor DeSantis is expected to sign a bill that will ban the teaching of history or any type of history in a manner that will bring about anguish, guilt, or discomfort, especially to white people. And we've been talking about this situation with political contributor and owner of DMV Daily Media Group, Hassan Giordano. You'll be hearing more of Hassan and getting his take on things. But Hassan, thank you, brother, for joining us for this conversation, brother. Absolutely, absolutely. When we look at this situation, and I want to kind of bring a little bit more detail into this conversation, because the word is that the legislation that's headed to Ron DeSantis' desk makes clear that schools can teach about slavery and the history of racial segregation and discrimination in an age-appropriate manner. But the instruction cannot indoctrinate or persuade students to a particular point of view. How the hell do you walk that fine line when you're teaching about the transatlantic slave trade? Either you're going to get upset or you don't give a damn. But how do you walk this? How do you walk that line?
Well, that's a great question. I think every teacher in Florida is probably trying to figure out right now is, how do we create a curriculum around this? Now, I do really think that this will be struck down in the courts as being unconstitutional, because it is an issue. The Supreme Court has already ruled that there are certain things you cannot introduce and put into curriculum when it comes to private and public educational systems, as well as universities and colleges across the country. So I do think this particular legislation will get struck down as unconstitutional. But here is a recipe for disaster when you have a one-party control of the legislature and that same party controls the governor's mansion in a state that they're trying to push a national agenda. This is the same legislature, Farajii, mind you, that just passed legislation that enacts an election protection police force, a standalone police force of $2.6 million annually with 25 positions to root out election fraud. Now, mind you, election fraud is like a unicorn. It's like once in a blue moon will you ever find true election fraud. Florida just created a police force specifically to deal with election fraud in Florida, which we know is code word for voter suppression against Black and brown people. I mean, look at the bills that are being passed down there. Like I said, the don't say gay bill that just passed. Yeah. This particular educational piece that passed, the election protection police unit that was passed. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is the man who I predict will be the Republican nominee in 2024, because I really don't think Donald Trump has the guts to run for re-election, because I don't think he's going to get out of the primary. And I think he knows he won't get out of the primary. And I do believe DeSantis is probably next in line to try to take over that mantle.
I can see that. Hassan, I can see that. I can see that, brother. I really can see that, because there's so much dirt that's coming up about Trump and the January 6th situation, insurrection, that I don't think he's going to have the full backing of even his own supporters as much as he did back in 2016. So I can definitely see DeSantis stepping up. My thinking is this, though, because this is a cultural war. This is not just a political war. This is a cultural war. Where do you think that the Democrats and the Republicans stand on this culture war? Do you feel like the sentiment of most Americans are leaning more toward the Democratic view of education, of politics, of social issues, or is it more toward the Republican view?
I think most of America is more moderate, right? And the problem is both of these parties are bolting to the right and to the left on the extreme views, right?
Yeah.
If it's the left, it's the liberal, progressive view of things. And if it's the right, it's the conservative view of things. The problem is I think most of America still resides somewhere in that moderate range, that middle range of, okay, I can get with this, but probably not to that extent, right? AOC, she's popular in her district in New York, but she's not very popular amongst, states like Montana and Iowa and Detroit. Even here in Baltimore, I don't think she would be able to get elected because she's a little too extreme to the left. Whereas though people like DeSantis and others in Florida, Texas, and other states are a little bit too extreme to the right. So I think if the parties begin to start to come back to the middle and see that moderate middle of independents and Democrats and Republicans who are only Republicans or Democrats in name only because they want to have a say in the primaries, then we'll start to see more compromise, things getting done, and a lesser kind of degree of battle between these two. If we continue at the odds, at the pace that we're at, we're going to get to a political and if not literal civil war in the next 10 to 15 years.
You know what? I don't doubt it. I think that the time will actually be shorter, Hassan. I think that we're probably going to get there much quicker. I think by the time we're going to get to the presidential election of 2024, there may be some major shifts, because I just feel like a lot of people, especially black folks in this country, we're just tired. We're just fed up at this point. I mean, yes, we understand that if we don't vote, most likely the Republicans can win. But I think that just because of how so many big issues that the Biden-Harris administration, so many missed opportunities that have been with this administration on big ticket items, I just feel like black folks are going to get to the point and we're going to be like, you know what? We've been under worse. You know what I mean? We've been under a lot of crazy presidents. At this point, we got to think about doing something for ourselves. We got to think about moving the needle forward. Like, we can't continue to kind of vote out of a place of fear and thinking that, oh, okay, we got this group in, therefore we should be better off, when it's showing us time and time again that we're still not getting some of the big things done. Like, when you have to force a Democratic president in 2022 to just do the simple things that he said he would do. Right. This wasn't stuff that hey, Mr. President, can you? It was like, no, I got your back. I remember him explicitly saying that on January 20th, Hassan. I got your back.
Right. And Democrats are going to realize that political promise stuff doesn't work anymore. So they've always spoon-fed black people to get them in office, but they've kept their promises to those who put them in, financially and otherwise. Every other racial group other than African Americans, they feed us a line of, and I think they're realizing slowly but surely that without our input of blacks and browns showing up to the polls, they cannot win. And 2024, if they don't get their act together over the next 2 years, they're going to realize that it's going to be a little too late. Then they're going to have to come back with a unifying force. And honestly, I think the Democrats have a very weak bench right now. The only unifying force that I think that they have in this country that they use on the sidelines right now that can bring the country together just based off of their demeanor, their charismatic way and who they are is Mrs. Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama was a presidential contender. Sure, she's going to get her criticism and things slung at her, but I think that she's to such a degree. Mind you, I didn't think Barack Obama was a great president at all. I think he's a great man, but I don't think his policies did anything for African Americans the way he should have over 8 years. However, I think Michelle Obama is that much more loved and respected by black, brown, white people across the board that she would help Democrats way more than anybody else that they have on their bench, including Joe Biden.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of our watchers says, does Farajii not understand that Sinema and Manchin are holding up Build Back Better? Y'all slow right now. Sheesh. Come on, RR. Of course I understand that. I understand that. But I'm not talking about just the policy. I'm talking about the attitude and the thinking. Okay, we say holding up Build Back Better, Hassan, but what about the George Floyd Justice for Policing Act? What about the Voting Rights Act? What about giving additional money to Americans that are still struggling from COVID-19? Right. I'm talking about those things. I'm talking about what about the whole college tuition conversation that is supposed to happen? What about talking about making a substantial investment in HBCUs? Yeah, Build Back Better, but at the same time, there could have been some gains, some wins that would have taken us a little bit closer to where we want to go, where we don't have to put our hopes all in one bill.
And that's the strategy that they took that they lost on. They went for the home run and they missed. They whiffed. Had they, like you said, broken down Build Back Better, taking pieces of the policies, like giving the monthly stipends for parents, for children to a certain age that was popular across all, even Mitt Romney wanted to vote for that. You break that legislation, that Build Back Better legislation down in smaller chunks, get bills passed that you can get passed and get Republican support, even if it's 2 people to make up for Manchin and Sinema, get something done. But America sees now you're getting nothing done.
Come on, that's what it is. Hassan Giordano, my big brother, I appreciate you so much for joining us for these conversations. We certainly want to bring you back on DMV Daily Media Group, folks. He's the great owner of that. Hassan, thank you so much, brother, for being on The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Always a pleasure, brother. Peace.
Peace. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come right back, let's switch gears. Let's talk about what's happening. Let me make sure I get my notes right. Oh, Smokey Robinson. Yes. He says that he's not African-American, folks. He's black. We're going to share with you why he differentiates between the two. And then later, we check in with Dr. Tanya Matthews of the International African American Museum in South Carolina. Stay with us. A lot to get to in the second hour of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome to the second hour of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, I want to have a conversation about something that Motown legend, R&B crooner, Mr. Smokey Robinson had to say recently. And it brought up this conversation that I think we've been having like this debate about language for many, many years. Like, how do you describe the dark-skinned people of this country? Are we African-American or are we black? How do you describe yourself? I just want you to, if you're watching us on YouTube, Facebook, put your thoughts in the chat. Do you use the term African American or do you use the term black? And I know that I often use the term black. Personally, I just think that black just sums up everything. It's a universal term. It denotes a universality to who we are and where we come from. So I use the term black. But some people really do get upset when you say, oh, I'm African American, or I'm black. No, I'm black. Oh, I'm African American. Now, I understand why certain terminology is used. I understand that, folks. And I also understand that, yes, we are a part of America. We live in this country. So black Americans. But it's interesting to see that this conversation is still raging on. Let me share with you what Smokey Robinson had to say when he was recently on The View and they asked him about his poetry. And he did this poem he wrote this poem called Black American. He wrote it about 18 years ago. And he gave some very, very, something for us to think about when he talks about the use of the term Black and African American. Check this out.
Well, to honor Black History Month, one of your poems called Black American has been animated by a teacher named Joe Young. And in this work, you want to educate people about the Black experience. Tell us, if you would, about the poem and what being a Black American means to you.
Okay, see, I'm a person, I resent being called an African American. I really do. Now, I've traveled all over the world, and Africa is one of the few places in the world that I've never been yet, okay? But I think that when you do that, you're disclaiming all the things, all the contributions that Black people have made to America. You see, I consider myself to be a Black American, and I enjoy being called Black. And Black has been so negativized as a color down throughout history by those who wanted to negativize it. And so it spilled over into the Black community, into the Black people. And even Black people back in the day calling each other Black was a sign for a fight or something like that, because it had been so negativized, like Black was just so negative. So I resent being called an African American because Black people have contributed so much to the development of the United States of America. You mentioned the poem, and I sent you guys these books, Black history books, and I hope each one of you got them. It tells all the Black contributions that Black people have made to America, okay? And in the poem that I wrote called Being a Black American, there's a passage that says, all the wonderful Black Americans who served in the armed forces and gave their lives in all the wars, they did not do that for Timbuktu or Cape Town or Kenya. They died for Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and Louisiana and Texas and Virginia, okay? So that's how I feel about it. And we have contributed so much positivity to America, I think it should be acknowledged. I think it's a shame that only white history is taught in our schools. Everyone who has contributed to this country should be recognized, and their contributions should be recognized. So that's how I feel about being Black, and I'm proud to call myself a Black American.
That was Smokey Robinson talking about why he calls himself Black versus African American. Now, folks, people are already checking in. Some of you are already checking in on our YouTube pages and on our Facebook pages. My man R&R said, look, I use those words interchangeably. It's not that serious to me. Okay. Yeah, it's not that serious. R&R said, oh, Lord, Black folks with these different classifications, at least Smokey not trying to be a Native American like some of these people on the internet. John James said, look, I think I'll take Smokey's thoughts over failed lawyer, racist, and heroin addict any day. He lived it. Wow. And he's talking, I'm not going to say the name of the person because we don't get into slander and all of those things here. But I understand that he has a certain view. Let me see. Let me go back to this because this is the interesting part about this, folks. The interesting part is that we're finding that people are not taking the time to really think about it. Do you think that Smokey Robinson's view is off base? Or is he totally off base? Now, when we have these conversations with our children, how do you have these conversations? Like, I talk to my son, I tell my son, look, you're a Black boy that's going to grow up, God willing, into a Black man, right? And even when he hears African American, I teach my son, like, you have different classifications. You do have different categories, right? Some people will call you an African American, some people, but I know and understand that sometimes language can serve as a barrier for where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. Language can serve as a real barrier. Look, this is what I want us to do. I want us to take a quick pause. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Culture Crew member Rashad Staten to get his take on it, because I know he got something to say about this. So we're going to talk to him about this, and we're going to continue the conversation about the use of Black versus African American. In 2022, do we need to make a change, or can we use them interchangeably, as RR said, or do we need to just like kill off one and then embrace the other? Look, we take a quick pause. We'll be right back here on The Culture on the Black Star Network, the Black Star Network. We'll be right back. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about Smokey Robinson and how the internet is just going crazy around how the Motown legend has put it out there that instead of using the term African American, he prefers to be called Black and not African American. This is based upon his conversation that he had on The View, where he was talking about his poem, Black American. And his breakdown of what this means is this simple, that he believes that Black is the best way to encompass who we are and where we're from, which brings up this age-old debate among Black folks that say, hey, we're not Black people, we're African American. If you looked at how we have described ourselves over the years, right? You know, we were once called colored, Then we were called Negro. Then we were called Black didn't become a part of the vernacular until about the 70s or so, the late 60s, early 70s during the Black Power movement, right? And then, of course, African American came a little bit, a few years after that. But there has been so many different ways to describe who we are. And it has not only been a conversation about language and linguistics and vernacular, it's been a conversation that has served as a barrier in some cases, because it has divided us within the community from seeing ourselves as one. I wanted to go to our culture crew member, Rashad Staton, to give us some insight, his insight about this whole conversation, and whether he thinks that, he agrees or disagrees with Smokey when Smokey says, look, don't call me African American, call me Black. Rashad, thank you so much for joining us, brother. It's good to have you as always.
Hey, peace, brother. Always for the culture. Good brother Smokey Robinson done great work, legendary in himself. So we want to honor him in the space where we can and we can hear it. Me hearing his sentiments and his shares, I don't disagree or agree. I'm at a space of understanding. Right, I think it's a complex issue that's grounded in identity, in normalizing his own lived experience. Right, in the context of him, he's trying to, I believe, without speaking for him, he's trying to bring up the validity of what Black folks or people of African American or African descent has done for this country. Right, and I think it lends a space of sovereignty, nationalism, and him himself expanding on the idea that, hey, even in particulars, he may, if we go back to our origin and our descendancy, he may not have been of African descent. He may have been of the natural Aboriginal people of this country in itself. So I think it lends a larger lens to the whole question: sovereignty, identity, and the normalization of taking the historical relevance of what we've done as people, despite of the language or the first tag that we put on it, African or Black. But in a sense, it's still, what have we done as Americans being on this soil of America?
And to your point, Rashad, it makes me wonder and ask the question, like, do we really need to have this conversation in 2022? Do we need to have this? Do you feel like our people know that whether you're Black or African American, you part of a group of people that have great, rich history, but also a part of a group of people that have been greatly oppressed in the same time? So do we need to get into a back and forth about language?
I think if the conversation is necessary and timely. Every 40 to 60 years, we see an emergence of how we are being recategorized, labeled, and put into positions where we have to find comfortability in where we identify ourselves. I don't see it as a distraction, but I see it as a courageous conversation for us to lend our lens to our descendancy, our legacy, and our impact of what we want to do forward as a people. I don't think, despite him labeling himself as a Black American versus an African American, I think he still is inclusive of being a part of the diaspora, of people of a larger hue, of melanin. And I think the melanated hue is what grounds us in our uniformity or identity and experience, that we all go through something that if we sit down and break bread with each other, we have some sense of understanding.
Right. Let me just share with you, Rashad, what some of our watchers are saying. T. Nixon said, look, where are we from? Nobody point to a place. Somebody point to a place on any map or globe labeled Black where we originate. He also said, let Smokey identify how he chooses. Black is not my identity. It's the culture that nurtures me and mine. Okay. Brian's melanated mind said, quote, we may have not done everything for Africa, but we still have a connection there, whether you embrace it or not. True. And then Davey checked in and said, look, I like Black because it's not exceptional. It's universal. So, Davey, I agree with you there. I appreciate you, Davey, T. Nixon, and Brian. Thank you so much for checking in and continue to give me your comments on that. So we do have a diverse group of folks that are checking in and saying, look, I say it this way. I say it this way. Crystal says, look, say it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud. I hear that, right? But see, at the end of the day, I do know that we are also in an age where language language matters, man.
Correct.
Language matters. And I have been in conversation. I will never forget this, Rashad. I was working in, I was doing some work with some other activists. I'm not going to say the group, but I was doing some work with some other activists, and we were trying to form this organization. Now, this is at a very critical part. This was like years ago. There were some other national things that were happening. And I remember sitting in the room. Now, we're all black in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember sitting in the room. We're talking about this big issue, police brutality, because all this stuff was happening then. And I remember sitting in the room and somebody said, before we talk about police brutality, I think we need to talk about what it means to be black. Like, are we black? Are we really black, or are we this? And I automatically, y'all can criticize me if you want to, I automatically got annoyed. I'm like, bruh, we came here to discuss this, and you trying to take the conversation to someplace else, because the police don't care if you're African American or black on your license. They just don't care. You look like you are part of the oppressed group. Therefore, I'm gonna treat you that way. That's how I was feeling at the time. And I feel like these conversations oftentimes, get into a space where we get so far up into the stars and into the sky and get so philosophical, and we got to build on what do we really mean by black, and it's a social construct. And it's like, golly, man. First and foremost, like, the system don't care. They're not looking at you and be like, well, because you're African American, you're afforded certain incentive, but you're black, you're going to suffer. That doesn't make sense. So to me, in these conversations, it just gets very, very irritating, because I feel like it distracts us from what we're supposed to be really doing and focused on.
Yeah, I agree. I think when it depends on how one wants to center that conversation, and divisiveness or a level of understanding. But in this particular moment, I think it's critical, because we are in these times now, societal wise, is making sure that language matters, right? And using the right context to frame where we are and how we center our humanity, that regardless of it, I think what's the larger discussion is that we have a universal experience of melanated people across the diaspora. And with that should create us understanding of how we work collectively in a sense of unity, although, we can't expect uniformity. And those are two different perspectives. So in that sense, I think it's necessary. I think it's beneficial. But I think if we are having these conversations, it's to go to a level of understanding rather than divisiveness. Because even when in the meeting that you spoke of, do we then project the ideals that we want to go and strategize this particular approach for Black Americans versus those that identify as African Americans? No, because like you said, those that have this conscious and unconscious bias towards us is going to just see those that are melanated themselves and ain't going to care what's on your your license, right? They're not going to care what you checked off on how you identify themselves. When they see you of more melanated people of brown and blackness, they just going to carry it out as though we're one size fit all and we should all be oppressed in itself. So I think regardless of it, is be comfortable in how you want to label yourself, but be willing to give a universal understanding that most of us of melanated hue have experienced something across the diaspora.
Right. And also about that is, we have to be very clear. And again, folks, I mean, if you use the term interchangeably, right? Because on some paperwork, on some federal forms, you might see the word black. On some things, you see some African American. I personally don't have time, Rashad, to be going back and forth with a joker or somebody about, like, because you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. Now look, like to one of our watchers' point, no place on the earth is called black. We understand that. But I was always taught that black is universal, right? That all life comes from black, comes from darkness. And I think to Smokey's point, where black has become a negative description, that's why we tend to run from it in some ways, right? Like, no, I'm not that. I'm a part of America. Oh, no, I'm not that. because, you know, I come from Africa, and it's fine. I get it. But at the same time, it's like, we really, when you look at how we're trying to expand the conversation, for example, it's not called the African American Power Movement. It's called Black Power. And it's okay. It should be okay. It should really be okay, Rashad, that we use black.
Yeah, I think come back down to it of an understanding. Are we speaking of sovereignty and nationality, as one of the viewers has said? Because then, if you're speaking of it, there's no place on the globe that says, okay, this is black, this is the black country, or things of that sort. You're speaking to sovereignty and nationality, in which in legal and in the international law, us is hue, right? I'm trying to refrain from using either one of those coins, but us of melanated hue need to figure out our nationality. So if you are putting Black American, does that mean that your nationality is of American nationality and sovereignty? Or if when you're putting African American, are you splitting them two between Africa and the American continent? So
but we are from America. We can't deny that. You know what I'm saying? Like if you travel across seas, you go to the islands, or if you go anywhere outside of the boundaries of this country, they ask you where you from. You're not saying I'm from Africa. You're saying I'm from Oakland. I'm from America. I'm from Baltimore. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm from Chicago. I mean, look, see, and I think part of that is in a mental place where we're in a state of denial. Like, I'm not going to deny the fact that I'm from America.
Right.
I mean, that's what it is. I'm from America. I'm not going to deny the fact that my people have been brought here to America, and a lot of my family is from America.
Yep.
And I can also acknowledge the fact that my people are also, you know, in Nigeria and other parts of the motherland. So why do we put ourselves in this like mental conundrum where like we just twist ourselves up and thinking like we can't be this or be that? You know what I'm saying? Like after a while, you come across as being very like confused. That's just me. Now I know a lot of people, you might agree or disagree. It's cool. But it's just it comes across as being confused that you say, well, no, I'm not from America. I'm from Africa. Bro, you're not.
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you, like my first experience of like feeling American was when I actually traveled out of the country. Right. And then I understood the privilege that comes with the American tag. Right. But then when I went over to other countries, you know, me being of darker hue, myself, I connected to those that was darker hue in other countries. So it was like, okay, I still understood this person that looked like me, may have spoke a different language, had a different culture and an upbringing, but in my hue of being showing up as a black man or African American man, when I look across and I see someone of Haitian descent or darker Dominican, it was like, okay, I can relate to them, I can see them, I feel them, I recognize them, right? But I also had that privilege of traveling as an American, right? Where sometimes we get incentive, sometimes we are awarded some level of respectability. And it wasn't me just showing up as a Black American. They saw me in my money and my wealth that I attained as American.
That's the other part of it. Shakira checked in and said, look, I am not bothered anyway, but I call myself Black. I understand what Smokey was saying. My mom always says we changed from Negro to Black because of the James Brown song.
That's the culture.
That's part of the culture. Live and Learn said, look, I'm a proud Black and African American. I don't feel the need to disown any part of who I am. I don't have any inferiority complexes, nor do I think that the degenerates of the community represent me. The degenerates of the community, Live and Learn. Wow. Oh, you might want to fix that language, sir, ma'am. Jeez. The degenerates of the community. Look, you can't look. Let me just tell you, this is something that I was learned and that was taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He said, no one man or woman can rise above the condition of his or her people. We can't separate ourselves from the lower, the quote unquote, those people that have not been afforded the opportunities that we have, nor can we attach ourselves to those people like the Jay-Z's and the Oprahs and all of those folks that have been on the higher part. you can't run away from who you are and where you came from.
Correct.
And that is why we are part of the reason why we in the condition that we're in, because we think of ourselves as being outside of the we, because we're so focused, because America will focus you on the I. Oh, if you are doing well, then that means that you are. No one man or woman carries or can separate themselves from that. You are not the we. I'm not the we. It's we. And we have to, I think, Rashad, just as we wrap up, we have to embrace all of us. We have to embrace all of us if we're talking about making any real progress.
Agreed. Uniformity. Not understanding that we don't have to be a monolithic people where we expect uniformity, that we all think and act the same. But if we come with an understanding of unity, then we are compassionate and empathetic enough and wise enough that we see and understand ourselves through lived experience. Absolutely. And that's when we move progressively as a people, as a community, and as a diaspora. And don't let societal norms become the divisiveness that distract us from the ultimate mission.
Hey, absolutely. Look, all I'm worried about is, do you know your history as an African American or as a black man and woman? It don't matter, because if you don't know who you are, where you came from, if you don't know your history, if you don't know the rich tradition that you are a part of, whether you're African American or black, it don't matter, because you're still not right in the head. And that's the big thing. Rashad, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's check in with Dr. Tanya Matthews of the International African American Museum to talk about the opening of the museum and so much more. Stay riding with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back. Now, do you all remember, like a few days ago, we had a conversation talking about this big new museum that was going to be located right there on the riverfront of South Carolina. Do you remember that? The International African American Museum. And I was saying right there on the show, I said, wait, you know what? We need to have a conversation about this stuff. This museum is literally built on hallowed grounds because our people who were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade were brought to that space that the museum sits on. But do you also remember that I said, you know what? I want to have that conversation, but then I want to have another conversation with the CEO and see if we can have her to talk to us more about this museum, this institution, about our history. And guess what? We're so happy to have her join us today. Dr. Tanya Matthews, who serves as the president and the CEO of the International African American Museum right there in South Carolina, is joining us. Dr. Matthews, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. How are you?
I am good. Look at the brother deliver on his promise to bring the CEO in front of the people. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. In a few moments, we'll bring back my big brother Rashad and to be a part of this conversation. But Dr. Matthew, I was very serious because when we first started, when I saw that the museum had been built, like I said, it was built on hallowed grounds. Yes. And I said to myself, I was like, man, this thing is real serious here. And of course, the museum has the backing of the Smithsonian Institute, which is that great network of museums and institutions to make sure. And look, and this is look at my man. Look, my guy Keenan, my engineer,
super producer. Look at you.
Look at this.
Just working it out. Just working it out. And I'm not even gonna let you mince words with the hollow ground, Brother Farajii. We are being built at the site of Gadsden's Wharf, one of our nation's most prolific slave trading ports. Now, you know, historians got all kinds of numbers and they like to think about it in different ways, but depending on who you're listening to, somewhere between 45 and 55% of Africans that came into this country would have come in through this very space. Wow. And we are building a museum on that. You're looking at our computer renderings because building is a verb in my world right now. So we are under construction right now and building up this space. And as you come down our grand stairway and past our curated gardens, one of the things I'm really excited about, we are not fenced in. We are not fenced in. We are not a gated property. And so we're going to have some accidentally random acts of education that are happening in our space as folks wander in. They go for the covering because we have shade. I don't know if anybody's been to Charleston in the summer, but you will be looking for shade. And so that is our driving goal there, to honor the untold stories of the African-American journey at one of our nation's most sacred sites.
So, Dr. Matthews, you actually, and I mean, the first and foremost, the rendering, and I know it's a rendering, but it gets us very excited. It's like a trailer for a major, summer blockbuster movie, right?
Right.
It gets us very excited about what's going to be happening down in South Carolina. If folks don't know, and I mean, I want us to really marinate on the fact that you said 40 to 50% of our people who were enslaved came through Gadsden's Wharf down in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, right on those grounds. I mean, when you think about the number of Black people that were a part of the transatlantic slave trade, and to think that one port would have that many people moving in and moving out.
Well,
that is mind blowing.
Yeah, and as we think about it, I mean, I think part of what we have to remember is, of course, we are talking about people, but at that time we were talking about business, we were talking about commodity, and all of us know a little bit more about the supply chain and how these ports work than we ever wanted to know. So as we're talking about our ports now that are being shut down and clogged up, it's because you do have these major ports that are supporting the majority of this commodity or that. And during the international slave trade, there was no difference, right? So we had several strategic locations that were importing all of these quote unquote goods into the country. And what we also want people to understand is just because your iPad is imported in LA, that doesn't mean the folks out in Nebraska don't have an iPad. So even though we do talk about how big and important and powerful this port was, we must remember that the institution of slavery was actually powering the wealth of the entire country. Well into our beginning. And we have these conversations, you know, it's not just the South. Yes, the South is special. And we have a particular claim to fame below the Mason-Dixon line, but recent discoveries such as the burial ground, the huge burial ground that we have in New York, what some of our churches and congregations are uncovering all across the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, even out into some of the nearer parts of the Midwest as our country was forming. So we were wealth. We were commodity. We were builders. And this space, though, this space is special. I like to joke, we could have become a park or a monument, but they're letting us build a museum. And so we get to tell some stories inside that space.
Dr. Matthews, tell us very quickly a little bit about, you know, where does this particular institution, where does this museum fit in the larger scheme of things? And I'm trying to think of some of the other major museums that speaks to our history, and I can't think of them in the southern portion of the country. Am I crazy in thinking that, or is it most museums like in the east or in the northern portion of the country?
You know, that's actually a really good question. And I think part of it is that most museums are small. I mean, of course, if you're up in the Washington, D.C. area, like I know you're up there in the Baltimore area, I was born in the DMV, we're used to the mega institutions like the Smithsonian. And perhaps if you're in New York, you'll see the same thing. But most museums are smaller and a little bit below the radar. That said, of the hundreds of African-American focused First Voice museums in the country, the International African American Museum is going to be about the second largest as we come online. I've had the honor and privilege of working with some of our largest, of course, the new Smithsonian, but also the Charles H. Wright Museum out there in Detroit, the DuSable over in Chicago. So there are many amazing institutions all over the country. But this one in Charleston is going to be special, just like all the rest are special, partly because of our location, and partly because we're going to really lean into this international conversation. I heard some of your previous conversation. We were talking about, so are we American? Are we African? What's going on? The answer is yes. And so one of the things we also get to talk about in this museum is the creation of the African diaspora. Now, we do not start the conversation with slavery because our journey did not begin with slavery. That is part of the middle part of the story of all that is African American. So we talk a little bit about the continent. We talk about the roots and the routes of our people. And we introduce the concept of the African diaspora because slavery was a global industry, right? And so we were dispersed all over the world. And then, of course, we settle down and we start telling some of our story through first a low country Charleston lens and broaden to a national lens, because, you know, we are a national museum. So we're also telling that bigger story.
Oh man, I want to do like this, Doc. I just want to do like this right now. I don't know why.
Because our story is good. It's good. It's good.
I love the fact that you're like saying like that is the middle part of the story.
Yes,
because you and I, we know that you know, in school that has been conditioned into our heads that like black people were born into slavery. Like that was our initial, or you know, that was our introduction to the world. We just born into slavery. And so I love that part, and I'm so happy to hear that. I want to bring Rashad, our culture crew member, to be back into the conversation. Rashad, thank you so much again, brother. What's your question, or what's your thoughts for Dr. Tanya Matthews?
Dr. Matthews, it's a pleasure to be connected with you and to see your full representation show up and what it means to the viewers and everything.
Calling the sister out.
You know it. I love it. I love it. Representation matters.
We're all represented right here, so it's all good.
Yes. No, and not even particularly a question, because you hit the nail on the head with just hearing you in the introduction. But I just want to just note the fact and just give you recognition and what this International African American Museum does and how you framed it is like us knowing our story and most importantly protecting our narrative. Even when we come into spaces where we have to be inconsiderate of how we label ourselves and how we want to identify ourselves, but institutions like this that are brick and mortars that allow us to free flow as people is very impressionable and invaluable in itself. So thank you for that and creating this space and how you all have used this sacred land. I just met with my good brother Sean Dove, who went over onto the continent, and he spoke of how in certain parts they have now their windows and their doors looking on the opposite side of the waters, because the waters had such a daunting story and connection to it. But now going into a space where they're redirecting how they build their homes because they want to honor it and rewrite their narratives and stories, right? And like you said, it didn't start at the beginning. The middle passage is a part of our middle story, and our story is not even done with yet. So I just wanted to say thank you for that and how you formulated that and contextualized that, because I think what you just spoke on plays a larger part to what we just was discussing around Smokey Robinson, that we don't have to negate either or the latter of it, but understanding the international diaspora experience of what humanizes us all.
Thank you for that. I'm stealing that phrase, protecting the narrative. I just love how you gave voice to that. And I think one of the things I'm excited about is that bigger story, right? Our bigger general story, learning the history of our people. But one of the things that's going to make us really unique is that we actually have the Center for Family History inside of the museum. We have a genealogy center inside of the museum. So you get your big story and your personal story. So all y'all that got all these memberships and following green leaves and trying to figure out what you're supposed to do with all these records, and you found your great grandmother's name and then you get stuck. So we are developing an expertise in African American genealogy. Wow. Trying to trace folks all the way back. I have one young man on my staff. He has traced his people back to the 1700s and is not even halfway done yet. And part of what we have to do, why we have to develop a specialty, is yes, indeed, slavery interrupted our ability to trace back. Think about families that are separated multiple times, right? And trying to think about how to track all of those names and narratives. Think about something called the Wall of 1870, which means that before 1870, the U.S. Census did not record Black folks by name. They recorded us as property, right? You got the name of the master, the name of the mistress, and perhaps, 3 adult African males, 2 African females, and a couple adolescents. So when you run into breaks in the documentation like that, it gets difficult. And so part of what we're doing is developing specialties and getting over the wall, under the wall, through the wall. You know how we do. So we will figure some things out about that and help folks not just get our bigger story, but also that personal story of being able to, name ourselves by names as we go back. And so I know my family is really into this right now. And now I'm glad I work in a place where we can get some professional help to support us in that.
No. I mean, I think that I didn't even think about that, Dr. Matthews, about, having us place a genealogy center. I mean, that just takes, for me, just took the museum from to a whole nother level, right? Because you just, you're looking at all this history, you're taking in all of this history. You're talking about it. You're excited about it, and then to say, you know what? Let's look into our personal story.
Yeah,
and that's like the perfect place to start having that conversation. To look into your personal story. When you're bringing your children out, you could be like, "Hey, let me share with you what they shared with me about grandpa and grandma,"
Yeah,
and it's just a beautiful situation. And I got a couple of questions for you, Doc. One is, this is being built right there in Gadsden's Wharf, Charleston, South Carolina, which I know is, South Carolina is one of those states that is really fighting against, Black history being taught properly. It's fighting against American history being taught properly, right? How are you and your team navigating all of that to make sure that this project, this institution is going to be built and to speak to that?
Yeah, so, that is a really good point. I mean, a lot of cities, a lot of communities are in that conversation right now. We are in that conversation right now. And also part of Charleston's own history has been some of the architect of some of the things that we know about, right? Such as the lost cause, different ways of thinking about the Civil War, calling slavery the peculiar institution, right? A lot of that is rooted in who we are in the Low Country. And so, it gets personal. It gets personal down in South Carolina. And so I think, one, we are leaning into the fact that we are a museum. Now I'm a nerd. Listen, I love school. School love me. But now some folks got to get in it. They got to kind of get in on a museum side, because museums are not supposed to be intimidating places, right? Like, you're not supposed to know anything in a museum. You're supposed to just go in there and learn some stuff, kind of wander around. We call it free choice learning. So one is to lean into that, right? So museums have the power to be less scary than lecture halls, right? At this point, less scary than school board meetings. And so as we're thinking about these kinds, so one, we're going to lean into that space, a welcoming space. Two, we can play a little bit, right? So one, if you're ready, we've got the gallery with the facts, right? We've got the Carolina Gold Gallery that's going to take you into the institution of slavery and what it was like in that space. And then we have the American History Gallery, our American History Gallery. We're going to show you this in a different way. If that's where you are, that's where you go. If you're not there yet, come on downstairs. We may have some Gullah cuisine demonstrations. We may have some live music demonstrations. If those drums sound a little familiar, it's because maybe there's some blood memory in there that has a beat that you sort of recognize from other places, right? If that's where you are, then that's where we will start with you. So that's one of the things that I really appreciate about being at a museum, is that we have so many doorways. And listen, I'm not going to judge what doorway you have to come in. I'm not going to judge what doorway you have to come in. I'm not going to judge whether or not you need an escort and a helping hand. And so I think that's part of the way that we can get in that space. And then the other part of that is part of what I'm doing sort of out here right now. Of course, everyone's going to champion themselves, right? I'm clearly drinking the Kool-Aid. If I tell you need to come to International African American Museum, you can rest assured people are paying me to tell you that. But as we share the story, we get other people excited, and then they go share the story too. And like, well, I know what you might think, but just go ahead and check it out. Just check it out. And that really, really makes a difference. And I know you got one or two allies, watching the broadcast. Y'all too, right? Because having folks that don't necessarily look like me and aren't resonating in the way that I'm resonating. When you resonate in a different way, you're like, I hear you. You ain't go check it out. Just listen. Just go on, check it. Go on to Black Food Fridays or whatever else they got going on over there. And just sort of check it out. Get in that space. Learn at your own pace, and sort of in those spaces. And hopefully, we can be part of the community that becomes a tipping point. Because for every American out there, not knowing our full history just weakens us. And I am a bona fide nerd. I don't ever want my country, my people, to be the dumbest in the world. And not knowing our own history kind of sets us up, for our neighbors to kind of look at us sideways. And so I believe that there is strength. I believe strength in truth, not fear, not weakness, even if it's quote unquote bad news. Don't be scared. It's not that deep. We're gonna be all right. Like we got all kinds of phrases for this. Okay, we got all kinds of phrases for this. And so I do think that as America gets better at grappling with its full history, we will become stronger, because that allows us, in the words of beloved Erykah Badu, to pack light. we can release the baggage of all the stuff we're not trying to admit that we actually know is there, and we can move forward. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I think you answered that question perfectly, Doc. I really do. We got a few moments left. So one of the things I saw is that you're going to be having an exhibition, and the exhibition is about the Gullah Geechee exhibition.
Oh, yes.
And I was like, yo, I'm gonna have to make a trip to South Carolina, son.
You are gonna have to make a trip. Talk to your producer. I heard you say live broadcast. I know that's what you meant to say. I know you meant to say live broadcast from the museum. So I'm just putting a pin in that.
Let me tell you, we can work it out.
No, we can't.
Do you know who my boss is? Roland Martin. He gets up and go.
Yes, and as soon as he's ready to take my call, I'm like, hey, brother, like really? Is it like that now?
The culture is coming to South Carolina. Trust and believe. Rashad is right there next to me. He gonna be like,
my bag is packed already.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so for your people who are like, what did he just say? What is the Gullah Geechee? And I'm gonna do the short version of this, right? So the Gullah Geechee people are a community of African Americans who have maintained an incredible linkage of their culture, their language, their food, their everything to the continent and to the other communities of the diaspora where we were spread. And part of the reason was because the way that slavery worked, the idea is to mix and match Black folks so that we argue with each other over our names and we argue about language. They even like to mix up folks who were fighting together. Okay, just for y'all that are getting caught up in that. That was actually part of the system. The idea is you put folks together, you create a situation in which they are battling each other and can't communicate, so they do not get together and rise up to be free. Right? Happy to report, greatest failed social experiment ever, because out of that came certain cultures such as the Gullah Geechee people. They did come together. They did create language. They did create culture. And then there are other geographic issues around the sea islands of the Low Country Charleston community that meant that often the slave masters were farther away for longer amounts of time from the enslaved peoples that allowed the culture they were creating to be less intimidating, less likely to be squashed. And of course, after slavery, when we decide we are not going to give them roads or bridges or infrastructure, on the one hand, you didn't get the infrastructure, but on the other hand, you had a couple more generations of isolation that allowed that culture to sink in. So now when you come down and you hear the voice, you be like, where are you from? They're like around the corner. Oh, where are your people from? Around the corner. They've been here for 400 plus years, right? And this is still what it sounds like. This is still what it feels like, and it's a living culture. And so, because of where we are, we were able to really double down, and we have a whole gallery, the Gullah Geechee Gallery, which introduces even our people to what we have been done, the epitome of sort of that resilience and holding on to the culture. And yes, and of course, the food is amazing. In terms of that, and the way we cook and think of spices and sort of those different kinds of things. But as different as it is, now that I'm sort of in this space, it just feels so familiar. That there's just something about it that still feels, familiar, like home. You got a home, then you got like home. And so very excited to be able to be in conversation with the community here and create an entire gallery.
This is phenomenal. Folks, you want to check out IAAmuseum.org. That stands for International African American. The word museum is spelled out, .org, to get all of the latest details. But the big question that I have for Dr. Tanya Matthews is, first, you can't come on this show and not have it all together.
What is the question?
When are the doors opening?
I know. As soon as possible. So listen, we are running down the finish line. Literally, this week was the first week that our exhibit fabrication folks actually could get in the building, start installing things. So we are still running and trying to see if we can create a late 2022 opening for us. So stay tuned. Go to the website, get on the mailing list, become a charter member. Ooh, charter member, because once we open the doors, you can no longer be a charter member. We will always have room for members, but there's going to be a special place for those who signed up to support us before we were. Those who remember us when we were, and that slide right there. Yes, the Gullah Geechee storyline. Thanks to cell phones, y'all can call up and hear a story tale for you and for your kids talked in Gullah. Some of those folk tales like Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, some of those other kind of legends that we like to tell as well. We're doing that with our public library. Mm-hmm.
Look, let me tell you, I'm looking at the charter membership form right now. I think I can work on becoming a charter member.
It starts at $25. Right, come on, skip Starbucks for 2 days. Help a sister out, y'all.
Come on. That's nothing. That's nothing. That's a small thing to a giant. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Rashad, you know what? Let's get the whole family in on it, Rashad. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
This is beautiful, Doc. I know our time has certainly been very well spent, but I have to say that I'm personally really, really excited. I'm excited about this museum. I'm excited that you are at the forefront, that you are the CEO, the president of the museum, because you are a DMV child. So now I know you're going to bring some flavor. I know you're going to bring that history and flavor. But I'm really, really excited, and we want to be as supportive. I mean, I'm not even joking. Once those doors open, Black Star Network wants to be there. We want to be there. We need to be there because we want to just celebrate this institution. And I know people have been checking in on our Facebook and YouTube pages and getting some more information, but we need to be there because this is an institution, and as Rashad said, that protects our narrative. And more importantly, it's going to be legacy growing for our children. I have 2 children. And so this is the situation that I want them to see. So, you know, we'll talk offline about how we could be supportive, but I really appreciate your time with us, Dr. Matthews.
Thank you for having me. It was good. It was good to talk to you both. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Folks, I appreciate you. Thank you, Doc. Oh my gosh. Rashad, thank you so much, big brother, for joining us, man. But we're gonna have to make a trip down to South Carolina, Rashad. I could just tell you that right now. We're gonna have to make a trip down there. We make a trip.
We
got Black Star the culture gotta be down on South Carolina when that joint opens.
It's for the culture.
It's for the culture, brother. It's for the culture. Rashad, thank you so much for your time, brother. It's always good to talk to you. Talk to you soon.
Peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings. All right, folks, that's going to do it for me. I thank each and every one of you. Again, folks, if you want to get more information about the International African American Museum, go to IAAmuseum.org. Sign up to be a charter member, show your love and support. But this is something that we definitely are planning to support over the next few weeks. So we appreciate Dr. Tanya Matthews, for being a part of the conversation. And, of course, speaking of institutions and supporting Black-owned stuff, make sure you support us here at Black Star Network. You can do so at blackstarnetwork.com. And certainly, you can just download the app for free. That's how Brother Roland set it up, for free. Tell all your family and friends. But you can support us because every donation you give helps us to expand what we're doing, taking it to the next level. We are Black-owned media like never before. We're not in competition with anyone. We are adding to the media landscape. And this show is adding to the media landscape for Black people to get information, news and information that is important and relevant to you. So blackstarnetwork.com to support. I thank all of my team, my wonderful guest, Dr. Tanya Matthews. I thank Hassan Giordano, Rashad Staten, and I certainly thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned up at the 6 o'clock hour, of course, is Roland Martin Unfiltered. And as always, folks, always remember this: never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here only on the Black Star Network. Peace.